I'm Stephanie Bendixsen, speaking from the past to you in the future. How is it there? Are we teleporting yet? Let's find out just how the future is going to move. In this episode, we're leaping into the future. What is transport going to look like 50 or even 100 years from now? Will we be zooming around, strapped into jetpacks, or will we be heading out beyond Earth? And how is our GPS going to cope when we're in a not-so-global position? Of course, speculating on the future of transport is fraught with danger. Personally, I can foresee a combination of all the things we've spoken about this series. Autonomous, electric, flying, ride shares everywhere with no congestion, being served by a steady stream of drone deliveries, automatically fueling up in the air on the run, no traffic lights, no stops, no worries. Well, it's either that or a living nightmare of permanent gridlock on a baking world where road rage is a synonym for driving. Or we could simply settle for a nice space ride to Mars and start all over. But whatever our future transport dreams, be they jetpacks or whale buses, we need to work together. So how do we do that with so many different visions of what that could or should be and so many stakeholders? Earlier, we were lucky enough to be visited by the Chief Commissioner of the Greater Sydney Commission, Lucy Turnbull, to chat about how she sees the city of the future. Thanks so much for joining us, Lucy.
It's great to be here, Steph, in the place where trains used to be manufactured.
It's an incredible space, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's jump into the future. I don't know, say 2056? I mean, how would you want to see people moving around in a time like that?
Well, you know what I'd really love them to be doing is a lot more walking, a lot more cycling, and a lot more scootering. Because the more active that our transport options are, the more we take active transport alternatives, the healthier we'll be, the less road congestion will exist, and the less fossil fuels will be emitting. So, active transport is really high on our priorities to deliver more of that. But also, the great thing is by then there will be a huge increase in the amount of mass transit alternatives. We've got the metro operating in Sydney, and that will really transform the way the city works. So I think my dream is for a lot more people to be walking, cycling, scootering, and also getting lots more alternatives for mass transit, not just east-west in Sydney, but north-south.
Now, I've heard about a concept of a 30-minute city. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, the 30-minute city is the objective that most people should not have to, or as many people as possible, should not have to travel for more than 30 minutes to get to where they need to go, whether that's school or work or going to the park, going to play sport, going to the shops, going to do whatever they want to do. So we have to create jobs, great schools, universities, everything, and great open spaces, great walkability, so that more people can live 30 minutes of where they need to go. I think this is particularly important actually for women, because you will get much higher participation in the workforce and in all walks of life if it takes women who are juggling busy lives less time to get from A to B to C. So, we have to expand the options within a short distance of us and create the social infrastructure, the social, like the open spaces and the spaces and the places that really work for people so that they can move around better without going so far.
And do you think that will affect our approach to the workforce as well? Will we see more telecommuting, for example?
We need to have that understanding that people will always go to city centres. Like the cafe contact idea is actually more important than it was 20 years ago, because people are less anchored to a desk, but they're still in a similar location. So we have to support that through encouraging things like walkability and really good mass transit options. So people can take the choices and make the decisions they want to make to live their lives the way they want to live them.
Who are the key players, do you think, in developing the foundations of our future cities?
Well, I think it's obviously the transport system is a key one. It's one of, so I think of a city as a combination of, how big the buildings are, how tall there are, how good the roads are to walk around and drive around, how much sunlight there is on the street, how much shade there is in summer. But it's also the transport system, the transport network. It's where the schools are, how good the unis are. It's this whole myriad layering of services and systems and places that makes good placemaking. And that's what we're doing very much in Greater Sydney, and we're working with our partners in government, across government agencies, but I particularly have to give a huge shout out to Transport for New South Wales. We are joined at the hip with Transport for New South Wales at the Greater Sydney Commission. We are co-creating a workable, walkable, movable, connected city for the future. I have to say I'm a little bit cautious about having coffees delivered by drones.
I'm excited.
Hot drinks drone delivered. Well, I reckon we should walk to a coffee shop and get a bit of exercise.
Well, that's true, I suppose. But there's part of me that just gets so excited about the technology, I can't help it.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Could everyone please thank Lucy Turnbull?
Thank you, Steph.
With me today are two incredible guests who are on Team Future Transport Tech. Please welcome the Scientia Professor of Artificial Intelligence at UNSW, Professor Toby Walsh. And the CEO of Vizalytics Technology, Aileen Gemma Smith. So, Toby, if you had the power to design a new world from scratch with all the new tech available now and being developed, what would your transport system look like?
It would be one that took us everywhere in a sustainable way. It's hard to imagine, though, what the future is going to be, because there's just so many options and so many choices. And I think that's the thing. People make the mistake. They think the future is something that's already been decided, as opposed to the future is something that we get to choose what particular type of future we want it to be. Do we want it to be one in which we're actually taking care of the planet and dealing with the congestion in our cities? Or do we want to just let things happen to us and it turns out to be one in which climate change has overtaken us and our cities have ground to a halt? It's all about making the right choices today so that we get the future we want in the future.
And Aileen, how is data changing our view on the way cities function?
Well, data is really, really important because it can give us context to what's happening in a city and why, and it can influence those decisions. So that way we can make sure, as we're thinking about what that journey is to the future, how are we including everyone? Data can give us that lens to how many folks actually don't have easy access to transportation or have challenges getting to that transportation, perhaps because they're older.
And what about concerns around privacy? When we're talking about data like this, I think a lot of people instantly worry about privacy. Is that something to be concerned about?
Absolutely. That's something, again, that we need to look at in context to understand, for example, is it important to know where all the students are? I, as a parent, may want to make sure I know that my student is there safely, but I wouldn't want to know that my student is now going to be marketed or solicited, or other folks can find out that information. So being thoughtful about approaches to how we really address privacy is important, especially because of the scale of data that we're creating today is completely different than what we did even 5 years ago.
I mean, you talked about safety. What other ways can data help the average commuter?
Well, we can be more efficient in understanding what do we want to be able to do next. It can give us that context that when I need to get home, think about taking the light rail instead of taking this bus. Those are quick things. But it can also help us understand in a larger scale, what do we want to be able to do for that future planning? Understanding how communities are changing and starting to think about using data to help us predict challenges before they happen so we can start to be more proactive instead of reactive.
And what are some of the changes that we can be making today to prepare for the future of transport?
Including everyone in the discussions. Certainly as we think about future of transportation, I've heard a lot of amazing things throughout this series, but make sure we're bringing all of those stakeholders to the table. You opened up saying how collaboration is so important. Collaboration is not only bringing together who we have as elected officials, who's working in public sector, but also bringing those users of those transportation systems to the table. So the perspective from a senior citizen, this perspective from someone who's just moved to Sydney is really important to be honored and brought into the conversation.
I think we've seen some really good examples of how technology has disrupted, often in a good way, in things like ride sharing, But equally, we're also discovering there are always challenges as well. How do we make sure that disabled people get rights? Because we used to regulate that tax is always provided for disabled people. So I think we're discovering that it's a difficult line that we need to walk to make sure that we get the innovation, the disruption that improves our lives, but at the same time regulate it in a way that makes sure, as you say, everyone's brought along and that we don't get some of the harmful sides of the disruption as well.
I suppose when you think about a unified vision for the future, I love the idea of us all working together, but I can imagine it would be difficult to get everyone to agree on things.
Absolutely. And that's part of something that may be in some ways harder than AI, is getting folks who have different opinions, different viewpoints, different fear factors on why they may not want to change the way that we're doing things today. How can you bring them together to the table? And I think it helps to start from a point of empathy and compassion for that person who perhaps has spent 20 years working in public sector saying, but we've done things in this way, please don't change this infrastructure, because then maybe I won't have a role. Or what does this mean for my organization? So understanding where some of that pushback comes through, I think is really important.
Technology will change society, and we're already seeing how smartphones are changing, how drones are changing the world. But equally, society gets to change technology, gets to choose how the technology is going to be used and how it can be, more inclusive, and how it can actually liberate us and deal with some of, the really wicked problems like climate change and increasing inequality, congestion, the way that the planet is being stressed today. We really need to embrace technology, but to embrace it in a way that improves the quality of all of our lives.
And do you think the transport user will be the ultimate beneficiary, or is there kind of a danger that the customer will be the last person considered as we stampede towards new tech and companies are trying to get on board?
I hope that the transport user is first and foremost, and I mean by that all of the transport users. So whether it's my 80-something-year-old father or my 20-something-year-old son, let's think about everyone and different socioeconomic backgrounds, not just how can we quickly make a profit off this particular market or this particular opportunity. Because if we really think about what a smart city is a city that's powered by data, but that data is powering how can we enable our citizens. So whether it's job retraining or whether it's getting mom faster to hospital in an emergency, those are the opportunities that we can focus on.
Actually, I don't hope that the transport user is the person first and foremost. I hope the planet is first and foremost, that we actually work out how to use the planet in a better, more sustainable way, and the transport user is second in line.
So as we build systems which support a new way of working and living in our future cities, how do we keep that sense of human connection? Because it all sounds very efficient, but also, I suppose, a little bit scary and impersonal.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, that's where the folks who are building are sitting together with those end users and understanding their context. So is a text message that can be written by a chatbot something that can come across in a very friendly and inviting way, but maybe can be escalated to a human to respond based on certain other responses that the user puts in, right? Thinking about how we do those interactions so it doesn't become off-putting, it actually becomes empowering and enabling, and really spending a lot of time, again, thinking about those user interactions for users who may not look like any of us sitting here around the table.
Yeah, it's about thinking about, well, what sort of society ultimately do we want to end up? Do we want to end up in a society where we all sit in our own little pods and we never talk to anyone? And then we discover that actually those interactions we used to get on the bus and in the train are an important part of building the society, building the nation that we live in, that actually brings us all together. Everyone has to sadly suffer the commute today, but that is actually something that brings us together as a nation. And we have to be careful that in designing that future, we don't lose perhaps some of those interactions which we will discover in hindsight were actually very important for building the world we wanted it to be.
Well, our field reporter Josh Phillips is determined to fulfill his flying ute dream, but sadly has realised it cannot be a solo mission. Luckily, he's found by some friendly participants at the local hackathon. Let's see what happened.
Getting a new invention off the ground is incredibly hard. Thomas Edison, for example, made over 1,000 unsuccessful attempts before he finally invented the light bulb. The Wright brothers failed for years before their prototype flew for the first time. And American entrepreneur Maria Beasley filed 14 patents before her life raft invention was commercialised, saving hundreds of passengers from a sinking Titanic years later.
The reality is, no matter what area you're in,
If you're an entrepreneur or an innovator, you're gonna have to get comfortable with lots of experimentation and even failure. But what if you are the next Edison or Beasley and just don't have the Elon Musk budget? How do you get your brilliant idea off the ground, and how do you get it done fast? Well, we're at the Sydney Startup Hub to find out how. This is home to hundreds of new companies, entrepreneurs and startups, all working on their latest ideas. It's also the home of the new Future Transport Digital Accelerator, which is cooking up some pretty interesting tech. I'm here to see if they can help me with my transport idea. Today, this is the Modern Lab, the engine room where new ideas get tried and tested. Steph, hi, I'm Josh, how you going?
Nice to meet you.
You too. Now, I've got hopefully what is an amazing transport idea, and I hear this is the place to be.
Absolutely, come this way, I've got a great team waiting for you.
Awesome, let's go meet him.
Great.
Unlike the old days, it's not a single inventor, but a whole host of collaborators who not only accelerate the process, but do it in real time and with real customers. I'm really interested to know what actually goes on inside the Transport Accelerator. So can you tell me about it?
We really focus on validating whether or not there's an actual customer problem. So that means that the transport cluster doesn't just implement new transport technology just because it's flashy and new. It's because customers actually want that technology.
So what we do here is very much the same process that you would take if you were a startup. The thing that most excites me is really taking the private sector type of working into the public sector.
So how do hackathons help you test your ideas?
When you are in a hackathon, you're given a time frame, you're given certain aspects of challenge that you wouldn't necessarily push yourself with in another scenario, and that really does speed up the way that you think about a problem.
So Martin, you've developed a product. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how this environment helped you?
We had an idea for a product called Swift Fair Fleet. Transport has set us up with a bunch of industry contacts, and they provided a bunch of mentoring and professional support, which has been really useful getting our product into market.
So if I was to bring my prototype in, where would we start?
First thing I would do is check out whether the prototype has a customer demand for it. There's no point doing prototype and putting it through to market if no one's going to buy into it. It's very important to have the community involved when developing transport products, because they can kind of really take it further than the limitations of transport.
So why do we need to keep developing technologies in this area?
Transport is the way that people move around, and moving around in the community and interacting with others is really important for all sorts of reasons.
If we can make that easier, if we can make that safer or more personalised, I think that would really have a huge impact on people's lives.
Okay guys, so after hearing all of that, I think I'm ready to work on my idea. Are you with me?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Cool, let's do it. All right, where do we start? We're going to need post-it notes. Well, one thing's clear, apart from my new obsession with post-it notes, now is the best time in history to be developing new technologies for transport. With AI and automation here, we're about to witness a new tech boom, unlike anything we've ever seen before. I can't even begin to imagine how we're going to travel around in the future, but I do know that if we harness the creativity of the community, we're going to be able to develop technology that will change lives forever. We may even see my idea come to life, or maybe there's another Elon Musk out there. We'll see.
So, Professor Toby and Aileen, one final question. Should we not be thinking, I suppose, further afield, heading to Mars or the stars? Is it possible that we could all be beaming across the world in teleporters? Is that where we should be kind of putting our thinking?
I think it's exciting that we will be going into space. I mean, we're democratizing space now. It used to be space was the thing that nations went to, but now actually private companies are lowering the barriers. The cost to go to space is dropping by an order of magnitude. It's still billionaires, Bezos and Musk, who are doing it, but eventually that's going to open up space to many of us. And it's not just taking us as humans, and maybe we are going to have space tourism, but it's taking things into space so that we can, carefully monitor the planet, we can monitor the crops, we can monitor climate change. The way that that's going to change the cost of putting satellites into orbit is going to change the world in a place.
And as we think about doing that, coming back to your point earlier, making sure we're taking care of our home Earth all the time. And we don't just say, well, we could go out over here so we don't have to think about those problems anymore.
There are plenty of good places to visit on Earth. I'm not sure we really need too much space tourism. But once we can go to space, there's so much we can do by looking back on Earth and looking back after the Earth in a better way.
Well, that brings us to the end of our season of Move. Some of our biggest advancements in history have been expressed through our ability to travel. And whilst we've created technological marvels, we've also made some messes along the way. But with the benefit of 2020 foresight, we may yet be able to be moving in the future as magnificent as these flying machines we've dreamed of. Thank you so much, Toby and Aileen. And thank you so much to you for watching. I'm Stephanie Bendixsen, and we'll be back next season. Until then, keep on moving. And where's my flying car? Can I take that one?